Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com, that's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really helps us out. It is a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely does mean a lot. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Gamley. How's it going, Lewis?
Going very well, Mark. Good to see you as ever. How are you getting on?
Not bad at all. How's the house moving going?
It's getting there, thanks very much, yeah. Feel fairly settled now. Still boxes everywhere, but, you know, my consoles are set up and the internet works.
That's all you need, mate. Forget the rest. It's all good.
That was all done sort of day one.
What have you been doing on said consoles, Lewis?
Well, on said consoles, Mark, I've been playing a couple of things this week, actually. I've found a little bit more time for a few different games. So I've kept playing Returnal, as I've been playing the last couple of weeks. Still not loads of time to pour into it, but as I was saying last week, I'm just really enjoying the gameplay. It feels so good. Forget for a second some of the wider issues about how progress works and that there is no save state and that kind of thing. It's just a total joy to be in and just running around and shooting stuff. And I've had a couple of serious runs and I've had a couple of times where I've just stuck a podcast on and played it in quite a casual way just to get to grips with it. But overall, really enjoying it, want to progress. But one thing that I have noticed is that I really struggle to kind of get into the mood to play it. I'm constantly thinking about, this is going to be several hours and I might not get anywhere. I might not get any progression at all.
I will say, if you're playing it for several hours, it is quite unlikely that you wouldn't make any progression. I would say, you're more than capable enough of doing that. However, I do understand the psychological hurdle because I had exactly the same thing.
It's exactly that. And now that I have played through the first biome a few times and found a rhythm to it and found my feet with the game basically and understood how quickly I can get through certain rooms and when to slow down and all that stuff. Once you've kind of got your feet in the door a bit with it, basically, it becomes much simpler and a lot less frightening to take on. But as I was about to say there, I just felt like I needed some other games on the go that I could switch to. You were saying quite a similar thing actually when you were playing it. You don't want to get to midnight on a night that you're playing it and thinking, well, I could keep gaming for maybe another hour, but I don't really want to do it in this. I don't want to have another run at it. So I've been playing 2 other things and I'll just touch on them briefly, Mark, because I've not played too much. I have started Resident Evil 8, Resident Evil Village, whatever we're calling it.
Nice. I think that we have to stick with Village. I just think we've got to make a decision here.
Yeah.
That's right. Resident Evil Village. Continue.
Well, I've been playing Village, yeah, and I've basically played through the first hour and a half, which is largely the Village section and the intro stuff. So I'm now into the castle, and actually, to be honest, some of that Village stuff was in the demo that I played, so nothing is too surprising so far that I've played. I'm enjoying it. I do think it immediately feels more actiony. I think it does feel a lot less scary than 7, right off the bat.
I give it time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've heard that there's some pretty terrifying stuff coming up.
I have to say, I think overall, I think that is a fair assessment,
yeah.
To be completely honest. I think it probably is less scary than 7, and it is more actiony without a shadow of a doubt. A shadow of a doubt.
I just don't find the Lycan guys very frightening or even that interesting so far. I mean, that might change, but there's quite a big set piece in that opening village section where you're kind of being hunted by a lot of them at one point. And yeah, it's intense, but I was never scared of it or them. I was just kind of like, all right, where am I supposed to be going? Why hasn't this triggered a cutscene yet, kind of thing. But yeah, enjoying it, looking forward to playing more. It does feel like a good extension of 7 with a lot of kind of fairy tale elements to it, which is quite interesting story-wise. I don't know how big that's going to become, and just very quickly, I put a couple of hours into the start of Star Wars Squadrons.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, a little bit of a surprise. It's just a game that I had kind of had an eye on since it was announced. Not really sure if that type of game, a sort of space dogfighting game is my thing. And because it came to PS Plus this month, basically, I thought, I'm just going to download this, I'm going to play it. It did feel like the perfect antidote to the stress of Returnal. And it's fine, it's good. I bet you if you're into this kind of game, you'll get a lot from it. I enjoyed it enough, but I felt like I wasn't very good at it, and I'm not that bothered about putting in the effort to get good at it.
No deal.
Yeah. It's just
the controls
really difficult, and balancing yourself in space and working out where things are. It was fun enough. The game was kind of weirdly unpolished in a way that it feels kind of like an old game, like a PS2 era game or something. There's only a couple of different character looks to pick from. You can pick a male or a female voice no matter what your character build is. It feels like there's a lot of building blocks that have been chucked in, because it's more or less just about the actual in-game moment-to-moment gameplay. None of the rest of the stuff matters all that much. So it's fine. I think if you've got any interest in playing it and you've got PS Plus, give it a bash, but I doubt I'll be going back to it too much, to be honest.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough.
And what about you, Mark? What have you been playing this week?
Well, Lewis, it's just been more Cyberpunk, which, to be honest with you, I have still continued to enjoy, basically, on the whole. However, I have had a few hard crashes now where it's like the game has fully crashed and kicked me out. Completely innocuous situations where nothing particularly exciting seems to be happening, and the game just shuts down, blue screen comes up, asks you to report the crash, and you're just like, all right, well, I guess that's me done. Then a couple of graphical things have happened as well. You get tutorial boxes pop up every now and again, and they're quite big on the screen, to be completely honest with you, to tell you about various things that were happening. And one of them just didn't go away at the time that it was supposed to. Like, they're just supposed to pop up and then go away again, and this one just didn't go away for ages. And I was thinking, well, I need to do something about this, because it's honestly, Lewis, it was covering a good, I would say, nearly 20% of the screen. It was a big pop-up, and so I had to quit out the game to the main menu to go back in, which is just a bit of a faff. And a similar thing happened as well. I can't remember if I said this on the podcast, where there's a part of the game where you're supposed to be glitching out, basically, and your mini-map and your HUD and whatever are all sort of glitching out and whatever. And again, that was supposed to happen over a very specific point in the game that related to the story and whatever. And it just didn't stop. It was about 20 minutes, and I moved on to another mission, and I thought, oh, when I start another mission, surely it will stop. And it didn't. It just kept going. So I had to finish that mission, which actually took longer than I thought it was going to, and then had to quit out the game again and then come back in to make all my HUD stuff not be all glitchy and whatever. And I was just like, oh man, it's just annoying. It's just really annoying. Wee things like that are really what the downfall of the game is. Even if someone went to play it now, as I have, you can still find glitches all over the fucking place. You really, really can. To be honest with you, it's terrifying that I'm playing it at a point where it has been patched a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And a lot of fixes have happened, and you're still getting stuff like that, and I'm just like, ugh. Far from ideal, I will say.
Do you think you'll regret having not waited until it was kind of finally fixed?
Nah, because I am enjoying it. The moment-to-moment gameplay, the story I'm enjoying, it's all good. I'm quite happy to play it, but it's just things like that will happen every now and again, and then you're suddenly reminded of the horror that was the launch of this game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, again, I don't know if this is controversial, but I'm quite enjoying it. The game is pretty good, I would say, on the whole, but it is buggy. Categorically, it is buggy. Anyway, Lewis, time for the news. All right, Lewis, this week we are doing something slightly different for the news. Because the news this week is basically what is happening at E3, we've decided to do E3 predictions. This is our E3 predictions show, which I am very excited about, Liz. Very excited about indeed. I'm surprisingly hyped for E3, I've got to say, considering it's going to be all digital. There was the whole car crash the previous year during the pandemic and whatever. But man, I'm on it. I'm ready for E3. Let's go. Give me some fucking announcements.
Yeah, I'm up for it. I'm trying to keep my expectations slightly tempered because we are still in COVID land, but we can hope for some really exciting stuff, I think.
Yes, always have hope, Liz. Have very, very low expectations and high hopes. But Liz, starting off with someone who is not going to be at E3, Sony. Obviously, they had their Horizon Forbidden West State of Play just last week, but this week, PlayStation Studios boss Herman Hulst did give a Q&A over at the PlayStation blog, which has given us a few new pieces of information. Firstly, he thinks that Horizon will come out this year during the holiday period, but it is not certain. Secondly, God of War has been delayed until 2022, although, quite honestly, I had zero expectations of it ever coming out this year, and I never did, so I'm totally fine with that. Yeah. What I'm less fine with is point number 3, which is that God of War and Gran Turismo 7, which is almost weirder for some reason, will be cross-gen games. They will also be coming to the PlayStation 4, which proves to me that the We Believe in Generations line from pre-PlayStation 5 launch was just marketing bullshit. It was just marketing bullshit, wasn't it?
Either that, or it's just that the situation with console supply and demand hasn't changed significantly.
I'm not having it. Not having it. Absolutely not.
I'm just reluctant to say that they've lied about it as well.
There are more PlayStation 5s in the world right now than there were PlayStation 4s this time when the PlayStation 4 launched, and they were not doing this during the PlayStation 4.
Sure, but
I'm not giving them that at all.
But they didn't have 100 million PS3 users to keep happy, some of whom were trying to get a console. So, yeah, I mean, it's not ideal.
Felt like they were saying they believed in generations, then went immediately back on all that, though, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, to keep the bottom line going, absolutely. I mean, I think there's two sides to this. It's not great for the games necessarily. I wasn't expecting a big technical leap from God of War. In fact, until this delay, I was still not totally convinced that the game wasn't going to be a sort of half step between the first game and a full sequel. I do think that delaying it confirms that it will be a full sequel. But I think it will run just like a graphically improved and faster version of the first game on PS5. So I don't think that's a big loss. And it's good for, that 100 million gamers to be able to have the option to play these games. But yeah, it's not great for the PS strategy side of things, who have been saying certain things to us over the past year or so and are now reeling back on some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. In a lot of ways, Gran Turismo 7 is weirder to me because it's a racing game. Racing games are usually a graphical showcase, a real demonstration of what new hardware is capable of, which I suppose it still could be, but if you're still pandering to the specs of the PlayStation 4, which is now, 8 years old or 9 years old when it eventually comes out? Is that right?
Yeah.
That's madness. Like, I don't understand why you're doing that deep into the cycle. Like, if you want to support the PS4 with these sort of new games for like a year or so, like, I get that, but like at a point for PlayStation and Xbox, you've got to draw a line in the sand at a certain point, I think, anyway, And as well, we are just seeing that reviews for Ratchet and Clank are coming in, which is a solely PlayStation 5 exclusive and could not run on a PlayStation 4, and the reviews that are getting are absolutely stellar. It's currently sitting with an 88 on Metacritic, and I think a lot of that is the innovation that the PS5 affords the game. I would love to be able to see what Sony Santa Monica can do with that, because in reality it's going to be really, really deep into this generation now by the time we get a Sony Santa Monica game that fully utilises the PlayStation 5 hardware, and to me that's quite sad, actually.
Yeah, I take that point, absolutely. I guess that is the same position that they were in with God of War 2018. It was coming towards the end of that hardware cycle as well before we saw them put that game out and really push what the PlayStation 4 could do. I guess what I really hope is that we do still see a God of War 3, for example, on the PS5. That if that is coming later in the generation, that it will still land within the PS5 and we'll get, much further down the line when devs really know how to make this thing sing, that's when we'll see a game of that caliber,
Absolutely. Well, I do very much hope that. Although apparently Sony Santa Monica have got another IP in the works as well, so it'll be interesting to see what comes there as well. But Lewis, moving on to E3 proper with the Battlefield 6 reveal. I'm not really sure if this counts as E3 proper, to be totally honest with you. But Battlefield 6 will be revealed on June the 9th. I don't think there's too much discussion here, to be completely honest with you. My main prediction for this game is that it will have a massive focus on Battle Royale. I think that they will be looking to find their war zone, I actually hope that they do something interesting with this game, and it appears that they are setting it in the future, which not really sure how I feel about that, although that is sort of different for the series. It's also quite safe as well. Battlefield used to be the main competition to COD, but has fallen away pretty hard over the last few games, unfortunately. The series, in my opinion, needs like a major refresh from where it was, or they have to start looking elsewhere for like their premium shooter, you know what I mean? Because to be honest with you, it's not their premium shooter anymore. Apex Legends is. It seems that the IP just doesn't have the luster that it used to,
I totally agree with that. It feels a little bit make or break to me that either this is the game that brings things back on track and gets people involved in this game, particularly if it does have this big Battle Royale focus or just a big, massive online multiplayer element to it in the way that, Warzone does. If they don't land this, who's then crying out for the next Battlefield after that again,
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Honestly, I'm surprised at the level of buzz that there has
been
around this.
Yeah.
But Lewis, next up is Summer Games Fest Kick-Off Live. This is Jeff Keighley's Summer Games Fest, which begins on June the 10th. This is an interesting one because it feels as though basically anything can show up here, Lewis. What are you expecting from this show? Because Keighley has a lot of big partners, and if any of them decide to show anything, basically, it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, this is a super hard one to predict anything for because like you say, the companies involved range from, small indie publishers right up to Sony and EA and others. So
Xbox is there as well, by the way.
Yeah.
EA, Square Enix, like all the people who you would expect to be associated with E3 are also partners of Summer Games Fest.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting, actually.
And so whether they actually show up in this stream event or whether it's just that they will be making announcements across the next week or so and that's all being umbrellaed by Summer Game Fest, it's not totally clear. I think we'll see a mix of things. I think it won't be massive games because it wasn't last year by and large. I think we'll get some interesting indie stuff. We'll get some curios that Keely's picked out himself. If you remember, like last year, they showed off, I think it's called Teardown. That was one that he was just kind of like, look at this, it looks amazing. I think that's something that he can do that none of these other events can really do because they're only selling their own products by and large, so you can get his genuine enthusiasm for some smaller titles. I think we'll see things like, if Sony are a partner, I think we'll get like a Ratchet and Clank launch trailer just there basically as an advert for the game. I think we'll see a few things like that. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a repeat of the Battlefield announcement within that show and things like that. I'm not going into that show expecting anything really mind-blowing, but what I am hoping for is a bunch of interesting games to emerge from it. Hopefully a couple of surprises, maybe some of the stuff that we would expect to see elsewhere in the coming days that will actually show up here. We know he's got good partnerships with Activision and the likes of that in the past, so yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at. I can't think of too many actual titles to put on here because it could go in any direction.
Well, Lewis, I'm going to throw something at you. Speaking of surprises, we know Keely has a very good relationship with one Hideo Kojima, Lewis, don't we?
We do.
Do you think we see his next project?
No, I don't think we do, no.
Me neither, really, to be honest, but it'd be great if we did. The second thing that I think is interesting about this is actually Elden Ring. I was listening to Jeff Grubb, who, think about Jeff Grubb what you will, but the man knows a thing or two about Xbox, and he seems to think that the marketing deal between FromSoft and Microsoft to market Elden Ring has fallen through in some capacity, or it's not what it once was. Obviously, Elden Ring had previously been shown at the Xbox stage at E3 2 years ago now. However, if Elden Ring is going to be showing off and it's not going to be on Microsoft's stage, which I sort of don't think there will be, even if they did have a marketing deal in place, this is going to be it, right?
Potentially. I mean, I don't really expect to see Elden Ring, to be totally honest.
Liz, can I be completely straight with you? Me neither.
Yeah, I think it's going to be another long summer, possibly another long year for everyone who's waiting for Elden Ring news. I would be stunned if that marketing deal had fallen through. I hadn't heard anything about that. And
to be clear, the marketing deal wasn't anything to do with exclusivity. It was sort of the same vibe that Xbox had with Cyberpunk, where like all the marketing around Cyberpunk and whatever was like labelled with Xbox and stuff like that. It wasn't to do with exclusivity. Might have included Games Pass, don't know on that point, but in terms of marketing, it appears that there was a deal in place, and according to Jeff Grubb, that deal is no longer in place, which means that it's sort of open season.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, surely, essentially, Sony would be sniffing around that then to try and get the same deal put in place,
Well, you would have fucking thought so, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're right, this could be a place that this gets shown off. I think that would really elevate what Keely's doing with Summer Games Fest if he got a title like this.
That'd be massive.
If it's shown, it will be one of the 2 or 3 biggest events of the whole E3 week, essentially, if it gets shown off. So that would be amazing. I wouldn't hold your breath if you are an Elden Ring diehard waiting for news.
No. But do you want to know my really bold prediction for this? When I was looking at the partners and whatever, I noticed that they had a partnership with Amazon Games and Prime Gaming, which are somehow different. My bold prediction is that we get some sort of new information on Luna, because Keely actually was a bit involved with Stadia and whatever when that was first kicking about. So that's my bold prediction there.
I could totally see that. I think that's a good shout, yeah, because he's the right kind of person to sell a service like that as well. Again, it's different to having Jeff Bezos stand up on stage and try and tell you that's a good thing.
It's a wonder that man's as rich as he is. He couldn't sell anything to anybody.
But if you have Keely going like, this is actually really interesting, that's something that people will listen to.
Yeah, definitely. Alright, Lewis, after that is Koch Media Prime Time. This is on June the 11th. The big rumour around this is basically that they will be announcing a new Saints Row game, which has been rumoured for a while. Otherwise, Metro and the newly announced Time Splitters revival are their other big IPs. Maybe we could get something from Metro, although Metro Exodus doesn't feel that long ago, to be completely honest. And Time Splitters, I don't think we'll be hearing anything from at all. They only just announced that studio was getting back together, so I think that they've got exactly zero to show off. But Embracer Group, who owns Koch Media, who owns THQ Nordic, and who owns Deep Silver, have a lot of interesting IP at their disposal, I would say. Most notably is Outlast, Red Faction, and Darksiders. They at least stand out. But also, Lewis, Second Sight, which I will forever say is one of the most underrated games of all time, and I would love for them to do something with that IP.
Yeah, that would be great. I would not be holding any breaths for that. I think that game is probably firmly in the rearview mirror now, but...
Never give up hope, Lewis. Never give up hope.
Again, this is another showcase that could go in any direction because there are so many companies and so many IPs involved. Hard to say anything in particular that will come up there, but I would imagine we'll see some old fan favourites be resurrected. That seems to be the whole MO of that company at the moment.
Yeah, it does seem to be their ethos, yeah. After that is Guerrilla Collective, this on June the 12th. This is basically a massive indie showcase. They've actually already had a showcase on the 5th, which we will link to in the show notes over at PlayersToo.com. But basically, this helps out a lot of indie games that aren't directly affiliated with a big publisher. So I wouldn't be expecting to see things like 12 Minutes or Silksong or Axiom Verge 2 or anything like that here. This is to market under the radar games, basically, to get a bit more eyes on smaller projects. It's definitely something worth checking out. If the first showcase is anything to go by, something will grab your attention. Do you know what I mean? There's so many, just by the properties of large numbers, one of them is going to appeal to you. Do you know what I mean? They're even doing a showcase as well, dedicated to wholesome games, which I just sort of love. I just think that's great. And I really support what these guys are doing. I really think that it's fantastic. And the more eyes that you can get on smaller projects, the better. And if they all band together to do it, I just think that's such a show of unity in the video game space. Do you know what I mean? It's just great.
Absolutely, yeah. Make their voices heard within this bigger platform. And yeah, if you're an indie fan, give it a look. As you said there, Mark, you're definitely going to find something within this showcase that you are going to be interested in.
Absolutely, and as we always say with indie games, like, a lot of things to keep your eye on. They might not turn out to be anything good at all, but there's a lot of interesting ideas to keep your eye on, and I think the indie space is just full of things like that, you know. Next up, Liz, is the Ubisoft Forward at E3, this coming on June the 12th. I think it's basically a foregone conclusion that we're going to see more Far Cry 6. We're going to see Rainbow Six Extraction, which was formerly known as Quarantine, formerly known as Parasite as well. We'll almost certainly get an update on Assassin's Creed Valhalla. We'll get an update on Watch Dogs Legion. We'll get an update on For Honor. But the interesting thing, I think, is that we are about to see a shit ton of service games from Ubisoft. I really do. Apart from the ones I've already mentioned. I think Riders Republic's probably going to be there. I think Roller Championships might be there. I think the Division Heartland is almost certainly going to be there as well. That's the new Division free-to-play game. And there seems to be a leak saying that Ubisoft are planning to show some service game that combines Splinter Cell, the Division, and Ghost Recon universes into the Clancyverse, if you will, Liz. I mean, it's a huge amount of service games, Liz. It really seems to be a new direction for the company, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. And this is something that Ubisoft have been hinting at and kind of referencing in their investor calls recently. They are looking at a strategic shift. And I mean, this is as good a place as any to start indicating that. So I think we will still see some of the bigger games, you know, like Far Cry 6 in particular. That seems like a very likely thing for them to spend a good bit of time on. And we know that something like Prince of Persia remake isn't going to be shown. And so
that is true.
Again, true. I think that probably clears up some of what Ubisoft's focus is going to be here. They're not looking at their smallest titles. They're not looking at stuff that's maybe a bit further out. I think it is the perfect time to talk about the Division Heartland, because that feels like the centerpiece a little bit of this new strategic move. It's the first thing that they've announced out of all of this. It's a big move. It's a risky move. It might get a bit of flack if there are too many of these games are announced and they're free to play and they're based on in-game currency spending and all that people get nervous about, or if a lot of them are mobile games. That could also anger a lot of diehard Ubisoft fans. So it's risky, but I'm interested to see where they're going.
Well, on the other side of that, I suppose, Lewis, is that there are big AAA games, and they have some that have been threatening to come out or are new to us and that we might be able to get a bit more information. Thinking specifically about the fact that we now know that Ubisoft are making a Star Wars game. Do you think that we see any of that?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance for that, to be honest. I don't imagine that game is coming anytime soon at all, but having already told us that it exists, I don't see why you wouldn't have some kind of very short teaser, you know, or just a proper title card, you know, that kind of thing, We've seen that work before with Star Wars games. I think that is the kind of thing that will keep attention on what Ubisoft is doing, even among all of these other big games that they've got to announce. So yeah, I think that's a decent shout.
What about that Avatar game that has been in the works for God knows how long? Longer than the movie, it feels like.
Yeah, I have no faith in anything Avatar related, whether video game or film. I would be stunned to see it.
You have no faith in James Cameron?
No.
How dare you, Liz?
I mean, he's been making this
very
film for about a decade now, so no, I don't think that that's happening. I certainly don't think we'll see anything about a video game related to Avatar until we see more about the films.
I totally agree with that, to be fair. I really do. And speaking of things that might not happen, Lewis, Beyond Good and Evil 2 and Skull and Bones. Thoughts there? Is we going to see Joseph Gordon-Levitt?
Those games are not going to be shown off, and they are not coming anytime soon, is my prediction.
Yeah, sadly, I think you might be right. I mean, God knows what's happening with Beyond Good and Evil 2, but Skull and Bones has been rebooted numerous times, and I really genuinely worry about that game. After that, Lewis, is Gearbox on June the 12th. And it has already been leaked, basically, that they are very likely going to be announcing a new Borderlands spin-off game, which apparently revolves around Tiny Tina and will be called Wonderland. I wouldn't be expecting too much more from Gearbox beyond this announcement, to be completely honest with you. Maybe we get some updates for Borderlands 3. If we're really lucky, we might get to see Jack Black voice Claptrap in the movie trailer or something like that.
Lucky us.
Oh, Jack Black's awesome, man. Don't diss Jack Black. Jack Black's awesome.
Yeah, no, Jack Black is fun.
On the publishing side, maybe an update for Godfall, maybe, but overall, I would not be expecting much from this presentation at all. I really wouldn't.
No, I think you're right. It'll be Borderlands focused through and through. And why not? Like, if this spin-off rumour is true, I think that's quite an interesting thing. Whether it's just basically Borderlands 4 or whether it's got a different feel to that, I'm intrigued to see what that is. I think it's a fun enough universe that you could do different things within it. So let's see what they do.
Oh yeah, totally. I think that is really interesting. I don't think it's going to be like a Borderlands 4. Like, they've specifically said it's like a spin-off game. But it will be genuinely interesting to see what that is. Also,
within that same leak, Mark, one of the most exciting things that I've seen about E3, or a potential announcement at E3, is this idea of Firaxis, the team behind the XCOM series, putting out essentially what is being dubbed Marvel XCOM, some kind of Marvel Universe XCOM game. Published by 2K, which is why it's kind of under the same banner, I guess. That is so exciting to me as someone
I mean, that's cool, man. Like, whoever came up with that idea was like, yes, you've absolutely nailed it. Yeah. That pitch is stellar.
Imagine going to Marvel Games and saying, we've got this idea, and you are the preeminent studio for turn-based tactical action. Like,
oh yeah, there is no one better than Firaxis. Yeah. Absolutely no one. Yeah.
It fits so well. We have no more information than that. There's chat about whether it will be an Avengers set game, although obviously Marvel's Avengers is already out there from Square Enix. Whether it will be maybe an X-Men game, which is tricky for your two titles being XCOM and X-Men, but X-Men would be a really fantastic fit.
That'd be so awesome. It'd be so good.
Or it could be some other, lesser known Marvel characters but brought together in a team. You could totally see how that would work. As someone who adored Chimera Squad, XCOM Chimera Squad last year, not the best game ever made at all, but I thought a really good spin on what XCOM is, and that feels more and more like a test for something like this where you need hero characters and you can't have permanent death. It all ties up to me. I really hope we see this at E3. It may not be. It could be a Keighley Fest event.
Yeah, totally could. Yeah, absolutely could.
I would just love to. It would be one of my most hyped moments as someone who, I'm not even that bothered about Marvel. It's not that. It's just that the pairing of those two things feels really good.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, Lewis, after that is Devolver Digital on June the 12th as well. I mean, honestly, fuck knows what Devolver are going to do, Lewis. Absolutely fuck knows. But I dare say I'm going to enjoy it all the same. They did put out a tweet that said, grab Hotline Miami 1 and 2 for 75% off and get Hotline Miami free, only to tweet 5 minutes later saying there is no Hotline Miami 3. Now, whether that is them just trolling or that is an absolutely immense double bluff, I wouldn't put them past it either way. Honestly, I wouldn't. It could totally be both comfortably. Ultimately, I'm sure they will surprise us. And I'm sure that there will be at least one fantastic announcement from them. There usually is. And regardless, it'll be fun to watch, and I fucking love Devolver, so yeah, it'll be great. It'll be great. If no one knows really why I'm going on about how awesome Devolver is, go and watch like their E3s from, I think they started in 2017, maybe something like that.
Yeah.
Just watch them all; they're fucking brilliant.
Yeah,
so good.
It's so far from a traditional press conference.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much, Liz. I really, really do.
Hard to again predict anything that will come up. Shadow Warrior 3 is one of their bigger games coming out this year. I think we'll see a bit of that. I would love to see the Katana Zero DLC that we were talking about just last week.
Oh man, that would be awesome.
That would be fantastic.
I never even thought of that. That'd be incredible.
Yeah, stuff like that. Beyond that, it's really hard to predict what they'll do. We might just see some of their other games get ports onto console or whatever. So it's more about the whole experience of Devolver Digital than it is about the individual games. So.
I would totally agree with that, man. Totally agree. All right, Lewis, after that, the big one, the daddy, is the Xbox and Bethesda showcase on June the 13th. I think we can safely say that this is the one that there has been most buzz around.
Yeah.
Not least because we don't really know how this is going to operate, I don't think. For now, we are treating them basically as two separate showcases, but I have no idea how this is going to go on the day. So starting off with Xbox, Lewis, I think it's a foregone conclusion again. Halo Infinite, it's absolutely got to be there. Two questions to you. Do you think that the game looks noticeably better from the last time that we've seen it? And two, do you think we get a release date? And I'm not talking about like a namby-pamby release window. I'm talking about a hard fucking date.
Yes, I think it will look better than it did the last time. I'd simply, if you've not got an entire division of that team working on a trailer that looks better than it did last time we saw it, then you've made
the bar was set
error.
quite low, so
yeah.
you know.
I mean, the real thing is, will the internet accept that it looks better, even if it definitely does? You know, will people just lambast it because it's fun to do that? I could see that happening, to be honest.
I mean, people from the PlayStation side absolutely will, yeah. Regardless, but yeah.
In terms of a release date, I think that they do need to, and I'll say partly I think that because I suspect that we might also see the beginning of a bit of a Halo 20th anniversary celebration start at E3, and I think as part of that you probably do want to kind of put the release of Halo Infinite as the big centre showpiece of all of that. You know, it's also 20 years of Xbox itself basically at that point, so I think we'll get a date. I think that date will be close to the date that the original Xbox launched on, and they will do everything they can to hit that. I think it will be mid to late November, and it will be the big release this winter. It has to be. It has to.
Oh yeah, totally, man. Yeah, I 100% agree with everything that you said there, to be totally honest. Beyond Halo, though, it's been confirmed that we won't be seeing anything new from Hellblade, which I think was a disappointment to the two of us. I mean, Hellblade is an IP that we loved. When Ninja Theory was bought by Xbox, it was one of the things that the two of us were like, this is probably what we're going to buy an Xbox for, so not to see any more of it is quite disappointing. But I still think that we will get like a section somewhere from one of the guys from Ninja Theory talking about potentially the Insight Project, which is a sort of thing that they have around mental health, or Project Mara, which is the total opposite of that, and is something that is meant to scare you shitless. So it would be interesting to see what Ninja Theory's involvement in this presentation will be. I think Psychonauts 2, which is supposed to be coming out this year, will almost certainly be there as well. I think they will likely get updates for Sea of Thieves and Grounded. I think that there's a good chance, actually, that we see more from State of Decay 3, which we've basically only just got a short intro trailer, so it'd be good to see more of that as well. I think there's a good chance that we get to see more of the new Forza Motorsport as well, which was announced last year. There was also a bit of a rumour that Forza Horizon 5 might be getting announced as well. But that, to me, doesn't make a sense for many, many reasons. Not least of which because Playground Games, who make the Forza Horizon series, are working on Fable, Lewis, which brings me to the question, do you think we will see anything meaningful from the new Fable?
Hard to say, Mark. I am not super confident that game is very far along at the moment, so I think that they need something that isn't Halo. I don't know if it's going to be Fable, to be honest.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that game is, because I am in agreement with you where I don't think that game is very far along at all. A game that is definitely further along, though, is Rare's Everwild. So I suppose, same question, do you think that we see anything meaningful here? Although we've known about it for quite a while, it feels as though details are still a bit scarce, to be honest.
Yeah, which is a little worrying generally for what that game is, or, you know, are they not confident in what it is to start talking about it? I think, yeah, we need to start seeing some meat be put on the bones of that, to be honest. And I would love to. It's one of the most interesting things that they've got on their slate at the moment, so yeah, that would be great.
I would totally agree with that as well. Apart from Hellblade, probably Everwild is the most interesting IP Xbox have got going for me. I suppose the next question is the same again, but for Obsidian and Avowed, this is supposed to be their next big RPG after Outer Wilds, the first new IP that they've made since they were bought by Xbox. Looked a bit further along, we got what looked like potentially maybe gameplay on the last time that we saw it. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, I'm not super confident that it'll be far enough along. I think we're more likely to see this than Fable, to be honest. But
I think it'll be much smaller in scope, to be honest with you, than Fable.
Yeah, we might see a little bit of gameplay, say, or a little bit of a story trailer, because there wasn't too much involved in that initial little teaser that we saw. But I wouldn't expect it anytime soon, so I wouldn't necessarily expect a release date either. They might just stick a 2022 on it and wait and see.
Yeah, I can sense something like that as well. And Lewis, exactly the same question again. For the Initiative and for Perfect Dark, do you think that we get to see anything substantial from that IP?
Nah, I think that is one of the furthest out, because they have been talking about that as being like the next level, essentially, quadruple A.
Yeah, quadruple A game, yeah.
So I think that they are going to work on that for a good long while yet.
Well, to be honest with you, Lewis, this sort of brings us to the problem, I think, with Xbox IP right now, where I think that the future of Xbox IP is looking very bright and very interesting indeed, and I'm genuinely excited for a lot of the things that we just mentioned right now. But it is quite a while away.
Yeah.
A lot of it is quite a while away. Fable, Avowed, Perfect Dark, even like Hellblade and Project Mara. I mean, God knows when we're ever going to see a fully realised game out of any of that, you know what I mean? Which means to me, I don't feel the necessity still. I don't feel the draw towards buying an Xbox Series X yet. But when these games came out, I probably will. But it feels as though the cycle's a little bit off almost for Xbox as opposed to PlayStation, who, when they announced their new console, it was like Demon's Souls right out the gate, then Returnal not long after, then Ratchet and Clank. Now we're getting Horizon, then into next year it'll be Gran Turismo and God of War, and we're just very confident that we're going to be getting a stream of new games. Whereas Xbox, it's like, when is this stuff going to come rolling around, you know? Because to me, it's not even next year. This is multiple years away for a lot of those projects, you know?
Yeah, I would say exactly that. Some of them feel quite a long ways away, I guess, and we'll come on to Bethesda in a second. They are probably hoping that Bethesda will carry some of the load in that sense of keeping the momentum going. But I think basically what we'll see a lot of from Xbox are updates on some of the smaller games that we've seen them show off before. Things like Bright Memory Infinite that was on the big Xbox reveal event last year.
Yep.
And I think that they'll probably just announce a lot of those are day and date on Game Pass, possibly even shadow dropped at the conference. And that's how they'll try and sell as Xboxes in the short term.
Yeah, I actually heard a prediction from someone else that everything showing off at the Xbox conference will be on Games Pass day one. And I thought, God, that's a great prediction. Yeah. I wish I could claim that as my own. But as you said, Lewis, thankfully, Xbox now have Bethesda and they are swathe of amazing IP to fill the gap, you know? So I think by far and away, the most talked about, the most interesting Bethesda game that might be shown here is Starfield, and quite frankly at this point I would be stunned if it wasn't there. I think the real question is, do you think this gets a release date, and do you think that release date is this year? Because there seems to be quite a lot of debate about that.
I cannot fathom why people think this game is coming this year.
Me neither. It would just step over the toes of Halo. Madness to me. It's madness to me that anyone thought this.
Yeah, I definitely think that. I think also, again, if supply of Xbox Series X's isn't increased by that point, you don't want both of those games coming out, and most people playing them on older generation consoles.
But as well, like, Halo will stick around though, in terms of that as well. Like, when someone buys a new Xbox down the line, they might buy Halo again. Like, the chances of them buying Starfield again, like, I mean, people will do that, sure, but
of course,
it's not going to have the same sticking power as Halo. No chance. Absolutely no way.
And yeah, we've just not seen anything from it. I'm holding out no hope for that. I think we will see it probably at the show, if only because Bethesda probably feel like they have to, because the internet is sort of demanded that it is going to be there. So I think we'll see something from it. I think they'll probably say 2022 as well. It might be next winter's big game, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if it was later than that.
I wouldn't be surprised if it was later than that either. As you said, we've not seen anything from this at all. We've got a title card and that's it. This trailer at E3 will be the first time we actually see anything to do with the game. So for me, 2022 is the earliest, frankly, we're going to see it. I think we can both agree that we're not going to get anything from Elder Scrolls 6. Talking about multiple years down the line, God knows when we'll ever actually see anything substantial about that. The other two games that we know have release dates this year from Bethesda are Deathloop and Ghostwire Tokyo, both of which are PlayStation exclusives. As such, it would be very surprising to me to see them at a joint Xbox Bethesda showcase, you know? Do you think we see either?
I think that is a really tricky question, because it would explain to me why they are keeping Xbox and Bethesda as separate things in this year, and maybe that will change in future if they show off these, as you say, PlayStation exclusives. If they were able, and who knows how these deals work, if they were able to say something like, here's Deathloop, here's another trailer for it, it's coming in September, they maybe don't mention which platform it's coming to. I can't actually remember if Deathloop is also coming to PC or not. So
I believe it is. I believe these are only console exclusives in both cases.
So they could say that for now, but imagine, for example, they could say Deathloop is coming to Game Pass on the 1st of March 2022, something like that. They could just basically co-opt it back.
Wow, I'd love it. By the way, what a fucking baller move that would be. Holy shit. I think that the other interesting studio here might actually be Machine Games. Obviously, we've had an announcement that they are making an Indiana Jones game, but again, talking about games that are years down the line, like there's a long time to go before that game sees any sort of realization whatsoever. I actually think that we might see Wolfenstein 3 before we see that Indiana Jones game, and I think that there's more chance that we see a Wolfenstein 3 trailer than we see an Indiana Jones trailer.
Absolutely. I think that is a good prediction. It's not one that people are talking about very much, but it's been a while since the last proper Wolfenstein game. It's been a couple of years since Youngblood even, so
yeah.
I think, that is spot on, and I totally agree that that's coming before Indiana Jones.
Yeah. I don't think id are going to be doing anything, although to be honest with you, I think they have now finished their planned DLC, but I know that they are updating Doom Eternal for the next gen consoles. I would be very surprised if we've seen anything from id at all. The other studio that I think is interesting is Arcane, obviously. I wouldn't be surprised if they announced something new as well. I don't think that it will be Dishonored 3 for anyone that's waiting for that, but potential new IP under Xbox, things that Xbox want. What a studio to start off with, what a studio to make you some new IP,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so talented, and you're totally right. They're going to want something associated with Xbox sooner rather than later. Absolutely, man. And I think that's the case with all the Bethesda studios. Although there are things that are obviously historic that Xbox want. Thinking of your Doom, Fallout, Elder Scrolls, of course they want all of them. They're going absolutely nowhere. But in terms of new IP for Xbox, I think that is very high on their want list from Bethesda. Alright, Liz, after that is the Square Enix Presents. This also on June the 13th. Now, this is an interesting one because the title card for this showcase says we are getting a world premiere of the new game from Eidos Montreal, who made like Shadow of the Tomb Raider and stuff, and the rumour is that this new game will be a Guardians of the Galaxy game. We also know from the title card that we are getting an update on Babylon's Fall, which is a sort of fantasy Platinum Games game, which looks very Platinum Games, so I don't really know how else to say that. We are also getting an update on Marvel's Avengers. This is very likely going to be the Wakanda Black Panther DLC, and I would have thought that would have to have a release date attached to it. And we will be getting a deep dive into Life is Strange True Colour and the first look at the Life is Strange remaster, which I believe is the first game in Before the Storm. I could be wrong about that though. But that's it. That's where the information about this presentation ends. And usually with these presentations, you get what it says on the tin sort of thing. However, there has been a strong rumour that we will be getting a Souls-like Final Fantasy game from Team Ninja called Final Fantasy Origin. There is also a whole load of Final Fantasy stuff specifically. Obviously, they have announced Final Fantasy 16. They have Final Fantasy Remake Integrated DLC, which comes out 3 days before this presentation. They have also announced 2 spin-off Final Fantasy 7 games, the Battle Royale called First Soldier, and a sort of abridged version of the whole Final Fantasy 7 lore called Ever Crisis. They have also got an expansion coming out for Final Fantasy 14 in November, and they could even potentially show off Final Fantasy 7 Remake Part 2, although cards on the table, I highly doubt that will happen. They also have Forspoken, which is obviously a PlayStation 5 exclusive, so maybe something could happen there instead. They have Dragon Quest XII, which they have just announced, which is absolutely massive in Japan, not so much in the West, although it's definitely gaining traction. And I would not be surprised if they have updates to share about Outriders as well. So to me, that is a shitload of stuff that I just said, Lewis, and none of it's getting mentioned. That seems madness to me. Yeah, I mean, whether or not that turns out to be true, that they are only showing what they've said, remains to be seen. I think you're right. Some of that stuff feels like it has to be there. Like the smaller things, even like an update for Outriders or, stuff of that nature, you just package all that in, don't you? Like you include those in your bigger presentation because you're never going to do a standalone thing for those. I think a lot of that Final Fantasy stuff will come elsewhere.
To be honest with you, see, having written it out, Lewis, I was thinking to myself, this could just be a whole Final Fantasy VII showcase. Like, you could just do that,
Absolutely. And there's such a connection between Final Fantasy VII Remake and Final Fantasy 16 and Forspoken with PlayStation that I think that you probably just do all of that at some other point with PlayStation,
I mean, that does make sense, but do you want to know my bold prediction for this?
Give me it, yeah.
Final Fantasy VII Intergrade on Games Pass, not immediately, but soon after the launch.
Really?
Yeah. Because the exclusivity with PlayStation ran out. It was only a year, so they can do whatever they want with it now.
But why hasn't the game been announced for Xbox then?
Don't know, man. Don't know. Maybe they're waiting for E3.
I don't know. I wouldn't be stunned if Sony have extended that or something. I think you would have heard about that game by now. But it's a bold prediction and I like it.
All right. After that is the PC Gaming Show, which is on June the 13th. Now, this is just a shout out for any PC gamers out there. Honestly, I have never once watched the PC Gaming Show and I have never regretted that decision, and that is the God's honest truth. But for PC gamers out there might be something there that you like, and it is on June the 13th, so you should go and check that out. After that, also on June the 13th, is Warner Brothers Games. Now, apparently this is basically just going to be a Back 4 Blood showcase, which is the spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead, which already has a release date of October the 12th, and we've already seen quite a lot of gameplay for it, and people are hyped for it. Like, Left 4 Dead fans seem to love it, which I think is exactly what they were going for, yeah. However, I really think that this showcase, or lack thereof, is defined by the games that aren't going to be there, specifically Gotham Knights, Suicide Squad, and Hogwarts Legends. I mean, we've seen quite a lot of gameplay from Gotham Knights specifically. Are you surprised that these aren't going to be there? Because to me, that was shocking, genuinely.
Yeah, I got to say, I am surprised. It does seem odd to focus just on Back 4 Blood. That could be an indication that some of these other games are going to pop up elsewhere. For example, at the Summer Game Fest could be there. I mean, there's also been pretty heavy rumours about another Injustice game at some point, and that would be something that Warner Brothers would be involved in. There's too much there. It seems odd that they wouldn't be including it. So whether that Back 4 Blood presentation ends up being bigger or some stuff ends up elsewhere, but those games, those two Batman games in particular, have been talked about for so long, and we have already seen a fair chunk of Gotham Knights. It does seem weird that we're not getting more of it. Might suggest that they're retooling that quite heavily. Who knows? But I really hope to see something from some of those games over the whole weekend.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Absolutely. After that is the Future Games Show. This also on June the 13th, although technically June the 14th here in the UK because it's on at 1am. This is a showcase that will feature apparently 40 games and will be of the level I would expect of between indies and AA kind of level. The article I'm referencing, which links to the show notes over at PlayersToo.com, specifically mentioned Sega, Private Division and Team 17, so it's that sort of level of games. It's weird to think of Sega as a sort of non-premium tier.
A mid-tier publisher.
I think we might be showing our age there, but yeah. However, this is definitely worth checking out. It might not be worth staying up till 1am here in the UK to watch it, but definitely worth checking out on a replay or something. After that, Lewis, is Capcom on June the 14th. They have confirmed that they will be showing off 4 games at least, which are the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, which people seem to absolutely love, and I think the prospect of a new game for a lot of people is very exciting. We'll also get to see Monster Hunter Stories 2 and Monster Hunter Rise, both of which we've already seen before, and Resident Evil Village, which I have already played and Lewis is currently playing. Honestly, I would not be expecting a lot from this showcase at all. Maybe, if we're really lucky, we get DLC for Village or something like that, but I know that they have a PvE mode in the works for Village. They also have Resident Evil Reverse, or Reverse, I'm not really sure how we're supposed to say that either, that's supposed to be a multiplayer effectively for Village, neither of which have happened yet, so I think it's much more likely that we would get an update on that than we will get on any new game. Basically, if you're expecting any update on the Resident Evil 4 remake, I absolutely, definitely would not get excited about that, unfortunately, because I think updates like that are much, much more likely. After that, Lewis, was Take-Two, also on June the 14th. So, we need a bit of a reality check here, boys and girls. GTA 6 or a Red Dead Redemption remake, which apparently was another rumour I was going about, is not going to happen here. It's not going to be announced here at all. That is not the way of Rockstar. Lewis, could you also read me the paragraph from the official E3 schedule to the listeners with regards to 2K?
Sure. Alongside press conferences from several indie developers, presentations from Mythical Games, Freedom Games, Razer and Capcom will take place, as well as a diversity, equality and inclusion panel discussion from Take-Two Interactive throughout the day.
Now, that says to me that Take-Two will be holding discussions and panels throughout the day about diversity, equality and inclusion in video games, all of which is fucking awesome, but what that basically functions as is filler throughout the day. Reading that, I would be surprised if we got a single announcement from Take-Two over this period. I'm not saying that they won't turn up necessarily at Jeff Keighley's thing or on other stages or whatever, but this isn't a presentation. I would be shocked if we saw a Rockstar logo at all, and if we did, it would be for GTA Online or Red Dead Online. That would be it. It would be no new announcements. Maybe the fact that the game is getting next-gen updates that are happening just now as well. Absolute best case scenario, I think that we see something from BioShock 4, but even that, I don't even think that's likely. Like, I genuinely don't think that's going to happen either. So, in terms of Take-Two, and particularly Rockstar, please do not get excited, because it's not going to happen. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not going to fucking happen.
Simply not going to happen, yeah. When that is going to happen, we will all know about it.
Yes, we will. The thing is that they just don't need E3.
No.
They could announce that at any point, at any time. They would have the whole news cycle to themselves, and it would be talked about for years to come until it got released.
Absolutely. 100%.
After that, Lewis, Bandai Namco. This, of course, is the other place we could obviously see Elden Ring. But for some reason, the publisher's own showcase is less likely than Jeff Keighley's showcase. The other possibilities here are Scarlet Nexus and Tales of Arise, two games which, as we say here, are anime as fuck. The other potential game that they could show off is the Dark Pictures anthology. The next game in that series is called House of Ashes, and that does seem a bit more likely to me. They could also talk about the fact that Little Nightmares 2 will be coming to the next gen as well. Beyond that, I really don't know too much what they're going to be talking about, to be completely honest with you. But Lewis, I do not think that we're getting a Tekken 8 announcement. I'm sorry, man.
No, I mean, I would love to see that, but I don't really have much expectation. Tekken historically always comes to arcades first, and quite a chunk of time before console releases. Maybe COVID will have changed that. That's one thing, but if there's any kind of announcement about Tekken 8, I think it will literally just be like Tekken 8 is happening, and that will be it. You know,
it's in arcades. Come to Japan. All right, after that list, the next one, the second biggest daddy after the Xbox One, is Nintendo. Although, to be honest with you, this will almost certainly be more important for quite a lot of people. I dare say to you, this will probably be more important than the Xbox One. But I would like to address a tweet right off the bat, Lewis, of Nintendo announcing their E3 Direct, which says roughly 40 minutes of information focusing exclusively on Nintendo Switch software. So, having said that, do you think we're going to get a Switch Pro hardware review?
No, I don't think that they are going to do it at that showcase. That seemed to be the rumour before, that it would happen before the showcase.
Rumour, yeah, exactly. The rumour was before E3, not at E3, which, and I mean, technically they've still got time to do that.
Yeah, I mean, they could be doing it right now as we are speaking to one another. That's the fear.
Don't say that, you've got me paranoid. You need to check Twitter now. You can't be doing that to me during the podcast.
But yeah, I think that unless they open that showcase with the announcement of the Switch Pro, because the whole reason people were saying that it would happen before E3 was that all of these other publishers would want to say, and our game is coming to the Switch Pro. So unless Nintendo opens their conference with that so that they can at least say that their own games are going to be on this Pro model, I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're too close to E3 now. I think basically if it doesn't happen before listeners hear this podcast on Thursday, it is not being announced until after E3.
That is so interesting, because I was so sure that it was going to happen before E3 the last time we recorded the podcast, and now I have totally simmered on it, and I'm just like, I'm not entirely sure this is going to happen at all. Before E3, not that it's not going to happen at all, because this is the most obvious piece of hardware that exists in the world. But Lewis, off the back of that, do you think that we see Breath of the Wild 2 if they cannot show it on the Switch Pro hardware? Because Breath of the Wild 2 is what everyone wants to see here, really, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is the $1 million E3 question mark, I think, because I don't know how they can go through another presentation and not mention it. We know it's coming. Everyone's excited for it. It will make them...
They did actually mention it in the last one as well. They just didn't say anything about it.
You know,
in fact, they apologised for not saying anything about
exactly.
it.
And they said they just needed a bit more time, and that time has come. I mean, again, COVID will have had its impact, no doubt, but I just don't know that they can go through another presentation and not say something about it. Basically, unless they're going to quite soon announce a Switch Pro Direct and do that whole shebang. But if Breath of the Wild isn't here, then I think it will immediately spark all the rumours that some kind of other event is going to follow quite soon. And if they don't have it, Mark, if it's not there, then I think it could be quite a weak showcase potentially.
Well, I mean, this is what I think. So I think we'll probably see Skyward Sword again.
Yeah,
we'll probably see Mario Golf again.
Mm-hmm.
We'll probably see Splatoon 3 again. Yeah. We'll probably see Diamond and Pearl Remake again. We might see Arceus as well again, but I'm slightly less confident on that. The rumblings of a new game are actually a Donkey Kong game, which to me makes a lot of sense timeline-wise. Like, Tropical Freeze came out on the Wii U, so it's been quite a long time for that, and there's been a lot of Mario stuff in the middle happening there, you know what I mean? So sort of makes sense for me that a new Donkey Kong game would come out. But beyond that, Lewis, what I really want to ask you about here is Bayonetta 3, Metroid Prime 4, and the Metroid Prime trilogy. What do you think of those three titles? Do you think we see anything there? Please just say yes to satisfy me.
I think Bayonetta feels like a decent possibility, I think.
Oh man, I don't know. Platinum have announced and released so many games in the time period where they announced Bayonetta 3 and now. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, that is true. And, you know, it wasn't part of the whole Platinum 4 thing, all of that. Like, but that's kind of why I'm saying it. Like, it feels like it has to be time.
I'm sure we said that last year, man.
And we probably did, yeah. I mean, again, maybe the caveat on all of this is that it may well be being thought about for a Switch Pro, and if they're not ready to announce that, then maybe it gets held back. As for the other two, Metroid Prime 4, no, I don't think we're going to see anything from that. I think it's still too far out.
It's been quite a long time since the reboot, though. Like, I'm a bit more confident about that now. Like, last year and the year before, certainly, no. This year, a wee bit more. I mean, we must be getting close.
Again, like, with the impact on development schedules and stuff, I don't think they'll want to show that off unless they're really happy with how it's looking, and I just don't know if they'll be there yet. The trilogy could really be the thing, that because I think, again, that would be a big seller for them. And I think, didn't Nintendo say that they were mainly focusing on software that was coming in 2021 as well? You know, a Metroid Prime trilogy that they could announce as their big winter release.
Oh, don't want to get in the way of Pokemon, though. Pokemon's going to be the winter release.
Well, yeah, I guess. But that's, you know, that doesn't satisfy everyone. So, I don't know. I could see the trilogy happening, and maybe the trilogy comes with an announcement that 4 is in the not too distant future, but I don't think Metroid Prime 4 is coming anytime soon, to be honest.
Well, again, I'm slightly more confident. Again, I'm not entirely sure the Metroid Prime trilogy even exists.
No.
I think that it's just a thing that people are trying to will into existence. Do you want to know my bold prediction for Nintendo then?
Give me it, yeah.
It's the 35th anniversary of Zelda. I want to see shit in the vein of Mario. Was it Mario 35? The sort of weird battle royale game?
Exactly.
Or hopefully something in the vein of the Mario 3D collection. I would love to see something like that to celebrate Zelda in the same way that they celebrated Mario. Something like that would be awesome, but ultimately Breath of the Wild 2. Please just Breath of the Wild 2.
Yeah,
that's
for
fun.
anything else, absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, Lewis, finishing up on EA Play, which is in July. Somehow we're covering it here and somehow we're still counting it as E3, but here we are. So ignoring Battlefield 6, because I'm sure it will be here after it's just been announced, it almost certainly will. Other than that, we know that E3 have several games in development, including a PGA game, but that's quite niche. We know that they have a Need for Speed game, which is earmarked for release in 2022, which is as yet untitled. We know that EA Motive Studios is working on a new title as well. There will almost certainly be some sort of update for Apex Legends and The Sims. Again, I was just saying to you before we started recording, it always stuns me how long EA spend talking about The Sims, but if you see how many people still play The Sims, that is completely reasonable. It's insane to me how many people still play The Sims. But Lewis, this brings us to the question of BioWare, which is a big question, I think. Dragon Age 4 Mass Effect 4. Do you think we see anything from either of them? For me, I think Dragon Age 4 is much more likely than Mass Effect 4, personally.
Yeah, I would broadly agree with that, although I do wonder if they'll want to kind of ride the coattails of the Legendary Edition of the old games. And
that would make sense, to be fair.
Yeah, and even if it's just like a quick teaser or, you know, a very short story trailer just saying, like, now we're in this part of the galaxy or whatever. I don't know enough about Mass Effect to say anything there. But,
good try, though, man. Good try. Really convincing.
Right? But yeah, something like that I could imagine them doing, because people are right now still talking about Mass Effect. A lot of people are still playing it because it's a whole trilogy of decently lengthed games, so I could see that happening. Dragon Age, you're right, I think is probably the game that will come the soonest of those two.
I think that they've confirmed that as well. I think the next game will be Dragon Age.
Yeah, and they've shown us tiny little snippets of it. They would do well just to tighten up just show us something that isn't just odd frames in a longer video about something else.
I think we've got a bit of CG now, but we've not got anything like gameplay wise.
Yeah, exactly. Really so something like that would be great, but I wouldn't hold my breath too much yet.
Lewis, do you think they mention Anthem in any capacity whatsoever?
No.
Not even.
No. Anthem's dead, man. Anthem is not. They're just going to move on from that totally.
Yeah, I sort of agree. I sort of think that's sad, but I also sort of think that's probably the right decision.
You don't want to draw attention to it if you're EA, so you just move on.
Yeah. I suppose the other big question around EA is, are we getting a sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order?
I mean, categorically, yes, we are.
Okay, are we getting a sequel to Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order that we will see at this presentation?
I think at the absolute minimum, like a title card would be really great for this. That game isn't that old now, but we're due it in the next year or two, I would say. And so given is just like because we don't even really know what that series is going to be called. Like, is it the Jedi series? Is it the Fallen Order
it's Star
series?
Wars Jedi something will be what it is.
Yeah, so I think they would maybe give us that and show, like, you know, one of the villains lighting up their lightsaber and saying that they're after Cal, or because why not? It's hype, it's Star Wars, you're going to get a lot of attention over it. You don't actually have to promise anything very much.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. Obviously their license runs out in 2023 as well, so I don't know how many of these games that they want to make before that license runs out. I'm sure that Disney will ultimately grant them a license to continue the series anyway, but yeah, I think that they'll want to do another Star Wars game like that pretty soon. And also, just to finish on, I hope that EA decide to dedicate quite a bit of time to their EA Originals as well. This is their indie game division, I suppose. Particularly with the recent success of It Takes Two and A Way Out before that as well. I hope that they continue to support indie games in that way, and that they can give people platforms to talk about them, because I actually think that some of the stuff that could come out of EA Originals could be really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Getting some support for that stuff is always great, and they should always feature that in their own presentations. I think that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Anyway, Lewis, I think we will have to call it a day there. I like episodes like this. That was fun. I like talking about E3. I like getting excited about new game announcements. That was awesome.
Yeah, next week we get to just unpick how badly wrong we got.
I mean, we're always terribly wrong. That's part of the fun. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to remind you that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at PlayersToo.com. That's PlayerStoo.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, it really, 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 really helps us out. I cannot stress that enough. I know I say it twice a week, every week, but it does not become less important on a weekly basis, and it really does only take you 5 seconds, and it really helps us out. And thank you so much to anyone that's already done that for us. It genuinely does mean a lot. I'd like to remind everyone that our play-along game for this month is Gris, a game that me and Lewis, I think, have both owned for quite a long period of time, and neither of us have played. So let's see who gets there first.
Yeah, I'm thinking it might replace Squadrons as I'm too tired to play Returnal games.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I like that. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.